I'm wrapping up this Halloween season with a spell and potion book. This is a handmade book and it measures approximately 9 by 7 inches. I'm going to walk you through how to construct it, how to do the patina on the outside, and also how to put together the book on the inside as well, and a very simple technique of binding that doesn't require any stitching. I start by cutting the pieces for the book cover out of heavy chipboard, and I'm cutting 4 different pieces. There is a front and a back, those are the large pieces, and then there is a smaller piece for the spine, and then another piece for the closure that's going to be on the other side of the book from the spine. Now the sizes are dependent upon the sizes of the pages that you're going to use. In the case of the book that I made here, my cover is 9 1/4 tall by 6 3/4 inches wide. And then the spine and the closure piece are 9 1/4 long, the same as the pages, and then 1 1/4 wide. And so that measurement had to do with how many pages I think I was going to have in the book. And I wanted, you know, a decent sized book. So at least 1 inch, I would say, or a little bit more. Now, there's one thing I'll mention here, and I'll mention it again when I talk about how to bind this, but your measurement needs to take into account the binding method. So I don't need as much extra space on the top and bottom of the book. So you want the covers to go out a little bit beyond the pages. If you look at a regular book, you know, the pages are indented inside the book by, say, maybe 1/4 inch. So I added only 1/4 inch to the height of my pages. So I had a 9-inch page. I added 9 1/4 inches. But for the width, because of that binding, it's going to take up a little bit of space on your width. So I ended up adding another 1/4 inch. So that way I ended up with a 6 3/4 inches width. So that's something to think about. Take the size of your page and add 1/4 inch to the top, and then take the width and add 1/2 inch to the width. And that way you will have enough space in the top of the bottom of the book, as well as on the width of the book. Now the next thing I did was I came in and painted everything black. I covered the part of the chipboard that's going to be on the outside of the book totally black, and then on the other side, flip side, I just painted some of the edges of the book because I'm going to be putting some decorative paper on the inside, but I still will have a little bit of the black showing. So I did a little bit of the black on the inside as well. And then for the front cover, I'm using these 2 creepy looking chipboard die cut trees. And so I went ahead and pre-painted those black because it's easier to get them painted really well separately as opposed to gluing them on first and then trying to paint them. So that was the basic, just get it ready. And next we're going to do the crackling. Now for the crackle, which I'm going to apply to all of the exterior of the book, I'm using a product from Ranger called Distress Crackle Paint Clear Rock Candy. I love this stuff. One of the things I like about it is it makes very, very small cracks. So it's great for smaller projects as opposed to something maybe that you buy in a craft store that gives you a lot larger cracks and crackles. So this will give you really, really fine, nice detailed crackle. And when you apply it, you want to put it on pretty thick. And the thickness will control how much crackling you get. If you've never worked with this product before, I suggest that you maybe do a trial so that you just get a sense of how thick to put it on to get the results that you want. And you can find this online, craft stores, Amazon sells it, so it looks like it's pretty easy to get. And I've been using this for years, ever since they came out with it. And then here you can see what it looks like after it dries and it cracks. And you can see just how detailed of little cracks that you get from this product. And then the last thing I'm going to do is to add a color to it, to just make it more interesting, and then also to help to bring out the crackle and allow you to see that little bit better. What I'm using is a product from Prima called Antique Brilliance. It's a wax. It's called Mystic Turquoise. So it's kind of a teal color, and I chose that. I thought it went well with the black, and it was a little bit of a darker Halloween type color, but it also went really well with the decorative paper that I'm using to decorate the inside of the book with. Now, you don't have to put a sealing coat or anything on this after you do it. It's going to dry hard. And another option is, of course, you could just use a paint. You could just put some paint on your finger and just brush the paint on. The other thing you could use is I use a lot of Gilder's paste. You've seen me in other books. I've used a gold or copper colored Gilder's paste. Same kind of thing. You would just rub it on. That's also another good product, and you don't have to seal it afterwards. It dries really hard when it's done. So here you can see what it looks like. I'm showing you the backside because it gives you the best picture of the Crackle, the black in the background, and then the teal that I've rubbed on top of it. Now I need to assemble the book, the basic structure, and I'm using a lot of different types of hardware. And then I've also got a decorative element in the middle of the front page, which is a skull mounted in a metal frame. And the metal frame is something that I've had in my stash. It just was the right color and it was the right size. And I'm using some different hardware. If you look at towards the middle of the book, what will be the spine, you can see 4 hinges. And those are one type of hinge. And I intended to use the same thing to put the closure panel on, if you look to the far left. But unfortunately, I only had 1 more instead of 2 more. So I had to do something a little bit different. And this is kind of gave you kind of opportunity to show you what you can do with adding a really plain hinge and then putting a piece of filigree on the top of it, and it makes it look really fancy. So the first thing I'm going to do is I want to have silver hardware to go with that. I thought the color was a bit better with the teal and the black. And so I'm first going to paint all of my hardware plus the skull. Now the skull was made from polymer clay, and I used this skull mold that you see here. It comes with 2 skulls. You can make 2 skulls at the same time. And I first painted everything black. And the reason I paint things black first is that I want to give it more depth. I don't want it to just be a solid silver. I want it to have a little bit of dimension to it. And the best way to do that is to paint, when you're doing metal like this, is to paint it black first and then go on top of it with whatever color you're going to use, like silver or copper or gold. And when you rub that other color on the top of it, you're still going to retain some of that black in the nooks and crannies. And so that's going to give you just a little bit of dimension and depth and a little bit of more color than just this flat silver. And if you look on the left-hand side, you see 2 very simple hinges. And those are the hinges that I'm going to use for the closure. They're not pretty, but they work good. And so I'm going to put that filigree. You see the filigree towards the bottom, and you can see what this looked like before I painted it. And that's going to go on top of it. So it's going to look really pretty and go with the other hinges. Now, when you're painting these, you're going to want to move the hinges back and forth as soon as it's dry, just to make sure that they don't get stuck and don't work anymore. And the product that I'm using to paint all of this is a paint made by Ranger. It's called Patina for Metal. And so this is a perfect thing to paint hinges with. And to apply it, I'm just going to take my finger and dab a little bit on, and then very lightly and gently rub the metal. And I also always have a towel next to me to blot any off if I get too much on, because I really don't want it to go down into the creases. I just want to get the surface of the hardware covered. That's it. I started by attaching the fancy hinges to the cover. Now what I do is I actually glue the hinge on first, and this is just to give it more support and to keep it from wiggling around, because even once you put the brad on, you might still have a little bit of wiggle room, and so that will keep it in place and not moving. So I glue that on, and then poke a hole with an awl, and then, or if you've got a punch, you can mark it and do that. But it's kind of hard when you're working on black to get it marked so that you can see it to use a punch. So I just get it in place and then use an awl to poke the hole in it. And then I use silver brads, and then of course open the brads up on the other end, on the other side. And another thing that I do with the brads, before I cover the inside with decorative paper, I add a little bit of glue, like Glossy Accent, something that works well with metal, or you can use E6000. I actually squeeze a little bit of glue into the where the prongs are opened up, just again to give it just a little bit more support and to keep things from moving around. And so you can see that I'm adding that, and you want to make sure that when you put your hinges on, that you do it at a 45-degree angle so that the other side of the hinge will fit well on the other piece. Now you can always also just hold up the spine to make sure that where you are positioning your hinges, you're not going to have any problem with there being a 45-degree angle between the cover and the spine. And so once I let that dry, then I go ahead and attach those two hinges to the spine. And you can see what that looks like here, following the same process of gluing it on first, poking a hole, adding the brad, and then opening the prongs in the back. And then once all that dries, then adding a little bit more glue to the prong. Next, I'm going to repeat the process with another two hinges to attach the spine to the back page. So I do exactly the same thing in terms of gluing on the hinges, and then poking a hole, adding the brad, and then going on the back side and adding some glue to the brad. So that way now I've got those three pieces together, the front, the spine, and the back. Now, as I said earlier, I'm using a different kind of hinge and something pretty to cover it up with for adding the piece that's going to have the closure attached to it. And what I do with these is I'm not going to use a brad in them, because if I put a brad in there, then the pretty piece that I'm going to put on top of it, I couldn't get it flat. So I'm just going to glue the plain hinges in place, and then once that dries, I'm going to glue the piece of filigree over the top. And of course you need filigree that's got holes in it that you can add brads to that. So the piece of filigree is glued on top of the hinge, and then I'm poking two holes on each side of that filigree, and pushing those through, and then opening the prongs on the other side, and of course adding glue to those two. So you've got the hinge glued down, then you've got the filigree glued to the hinge, and then you've got the brads going through the chipboard and then opened up and then glued again in the back. And so once I add those hinges to the back, then I add them to the piece that's going to hold the closure. And then you can see that next you would actually add the closure. You want to add the piece to the side first, and then once you get that glued and the brads in and that dries, then you can go and add the other piece that actually goes through the hole in the closure to the front of the book. And that's done exactly the same way. Glue it in place, poke the holes, add the brads. And now you can see how all the hardware in this picture here, how it's all attached to get all the pieces of the book put together. Now we can go to the inside of the book, and you can see here I'm starting to add decorative paper to the spine piece and the closure piece. You can go ahead and add that at this point. You don't want to add the pieces that are going to go on the front and the back, because you're going to want to attach the stuff that we're going to use to create a way of binding all the pages together. Now, the decorative paper that I'm using is this 12 by 12 paper pad called Cosmos. It's got a lot of gorgeous images and stuff that I thought would work well. And you can also see now why I chose the color scheme on the front to kind of work with this paper. And so I'm using this paper to cover the inside of the book, but I'm also using some of this paper to create pages for the book itself. There's lots of really beautiful pages, and then there's also lots of images that you could cut out and add to other pages. Now, what I'm using to attach the pages to the book are these accordion folded pieces of paper. And I want you to notice, as you look to the left and you look to the right, there's a big section of paper, and then you've got smaller folds. Now, those two big sections of paper are what you will use to attach the pages to the book itself. And so what you want to do is I used, I think, 2 inches. So the first fold was 2 inches, and then I folded the paper after that 1/2 inch. So you get this accordion fold as many folds as you can, and then if you have excess, or you have the last fold is a little small, you just snip that off. And I'm cutting these the height of the paper, or the pages, which my pages are 9 inches tall, so my paper is 9 inches, and I'm just using some thin paper. It's not heavy like cardstock or like decorative paper. This is a thinner paper. It's kind of the weight of copier paper, because you don't want to create too much bulk. And this is double-sided. I bought it in a pack, actually found it on Amazon. I'm sure you can find it in other stores, craft stores, and probably office supply stores, but it's a parchment kind of paper, and it had like 5 or 6 different patterns. And so this is what I'm using, because it is double-sided and it is thin. And I'm also using some of the papers in this pack to create more pages in the book, because to fill a book that's 1 1/4 inches, it takes a lot of pages. So I'm using it for that as well. So what you want to do is do a bunch of accordion folded pages that are whatever the height of your pages are, and just make sure that you have a section that has a large tab for the the right side, and one that has a large tab for the left side, and then however many pages that paper you need to use to make as many folds as pages that you have. And so what you'll do when you get ready to combine those sections of accordion folded paper, you'll just glue them together. You'll use the last tab on the one and the first tab on the other and just glue the two together, just making sure that the accordion fold is going in the same direction. Now, when you attach your pages, and I'll go through this a little bit more, but while we're actually looking at this, you're going to glue a page of your book on the front of a fold and then on the back of the fold. So one fold is going to have 2 pages on it, on the front, on the back, and then you'll be gluing those 2 pages together so that they will be nice and secure and be held by the accordion fold. And you'll just continue to do that throughout the book. What I did is, because I wasn't exactly sure how many pages it would take to fill the book, and it's hard to gauge by just stacking up your pages, because this accordion fold is going to create some thickness that goes beyond the pages that you have. So you kind of have to start making pages and adding them to your accordion folds until you think you've got enough to fill the whole book. So I just started with the one that you see on the left, and I was adding my pages, and then when I got that filled, then I added another sheet of accordion folded paper and I filled those with pages, and I kept doing that, just making sure that by the time I got towards the end, the last set of the last accordion folded paper had that other tab on it so that I could attach that to the book. So once you do this, the other thing that you'll want to do is with the accordion fold, if you leave it like this, like it is, and you attach this to the book, the pages are going to flop out because there's nothing to keep the back of the accordion fold to the book. So what you're going to do next is you're going to glue the back side of each accordion folded piece of paper. So what you can see here is you can see the left tab, and then I've flipped it over and I've gone in and I've added glue to each one of those folds. So those folds will be stuck together. They won't actually accordion fold out. And so that way you're going to get a solid spine in the back, and it won't be open and your pages be able to flop in and out of the book. So I just kind of did that as I went. I took that first section of accordion folded paper, I folded it like I needed it, I flipped it over, glued the back, glued each one of the folds down, and then I started adding my pages. And then I went to the next section and the next section, because it's going to take you, if you're filling up a book that's an inch or more, it's going to take you multiple sections to get this done. And so I just continued to do that, adding paper, adding more and more pages, and then adding more and more sections, and continuing on through until I thought I had enough pages. Now here you can see how I've actually glued a page to the accordion fold after, like I said, after I've got the back side of the accordion fold glued. And then once I do that, then I go on to put a page on the other side of the accordion fold. So the first page you saw was just a blank kind of decorative page. And what I figured is that later on, as time went on and I ran into different things that I wanted to add to the book, with all these extra blank pages, I could add other things. And I could also add some of the elements from the decorative paper. So here you see I've added a spell on the other side of the accordion fold, and I've glued it to the decorative, the distressed looking piece of paper. And then I go on to the next one, and then I add a piece of paper to the next fold, the front of it, and then I'm going to add another piece of paper to the back of it. And here you can see that I've used an actual piece of paper from the decorative paper pack. For the spells and potions, and also for the title page of the book, I'm using 2 of my digital image kits. The first one is an older one. It contains 13 spells and potions, plus some other pages with mystical symbols and stuff like that on it. And some of the spells are things like Banish a Ghost, Love Potion, Protection from Evil. All of these were written by me except for the Witch's Brew, which is from Shakespeare. And then I just finished a second set, which gives you 14 pages. And along with all the different spells and potions, there's also lots of pages of different mystical images. And on this one are things like Memory Charm, Summon a Dragon, Conjure a Storm, and so forth. So these kits, the pages in them are 5x7, and I made them 5x7 so that you could print 2 on a single sheet of 8.5x11 paper. Now for this book I wanted something a little bit larger than that, and that's the beauty of a digital kit, is all the images are separate, so you can copy and paste them into Word or any other type software that you have that will allow you to make it bigger. So I enlarged it so that I got at least a 9-inch by a 6.5-inch page. And then if you want to do something really small, I have collage sheets that are the same things. There's a number 1 and number 2 that have a smaller mini version. So if you want to just make a little mini spell or charm book, you can. The next thing I want to talk about is distressing the pages in the book, and I want to cover this before I finish up with actually adding the book to the cover. And of course, one of the things you can always do is tear the edges of the images of the pages, and then use like alcohol or ink pads to add coloring, darkening them, giving them a kind of a aged look. But there's a couple other things I'd like to show you. One is this is a pair of scissors from Fisker, and the pattern of the scissor is called Crackle, and it has a really good edge on it that cuts a very random pattern, like a torn random pattern. So that's kind of an easy way to quickly give your paper a worn edge. And then the other thing I want to talk to you about is a technique using lemon juice and a heat gun to age and darken paper. And it's very simple. You just can use a fresh squeezed lemon, or I buy these little containers of lemon juice. I think it will work with lime juice as well. It's the acid that's important. And either use a little sponge or a brush or something like that and apply the liquid to wherever you want to make the paper look distressed. And then you want to use a heat gun, and the heat from the gun will actually start burning the acid in the liquid. And as you can see here, you can see what it starts to do. It starts to turn brown. And of course, the longer you heat it, the more brown it gets, and you will kind of get a burning smell. And this is probably something not to let kids do on their own. That should be supervised, because you do not want your paper bursting into flames. And then here you can see where I've done it, where I've used that Crackle pair of scissors, and then I've done it on top of that. I've applied the juice and then used the heat gun. And I don't think this will work with a blow dryer. I don't think it gets hot enough. And then I want to show you how it looks on an actual page in my book. So you can see here that I've cut away pieces of the edge of the page, and then I've also used that treatment. And of course, you can use this anywhere on a page. So here you can see where I put some of the lemon juice or the lemon juice in the middle of the page, or in another part that's not on the edge, and then use the heat gun. And you don't have to be careful or perfect about how you apply it, because depending on how thick the lemon juice is and where, it'll give you different and darker or lighter spots. So it's a very, very quick way to easily add some distress areas on your pages. And what I did in terms of the distressing, I found it was easier to do all of that once I had all my pages glued to the accordion folded paper. And the reason is because you're backing the pages, you're putting one page on the one side of the fold and the other on the other side of the fold, and you're gluing the two together. If I were to distress and cut and pare away each page separately, they may not match. And so if you glue them together and then start doing that, they will match, because you're probably going to have pages that aren't double-sided. So if you cut away part of one page and the other page that backs it's got white on the back of it, you're going to see that. So it's pretty easy just to work with it once you've got it all put together, and then just go through page by page and cut and tear and use the heat gun or whatever you want to do to make it look really distressed. And then here you can see I'm now going to, now that I've got all my pages, I'm going to glue this in place, and you can actually see in this picture all my pages, and you can see how worn and distressed and that they look by looking at them on the edge. Now you see the two tabs that I've been talking about all along, the accordion fold tabs for the right and the left, and that's what you're going to use to glue the book pages to the actual cover. And so you just want to glue that and let that dry. And once it dries, then I came back in with my decorative paper and added the decorative paper on top of that. So it hides it, and it gives it more support in terms of gluing it down. And of course I've already given extra support to the brads that I use to put the hinges on. So you'll want to use a lot of glue. You want to make sure that you've got the paper that you're adding completely glued, all the whole surface, so that you really get a good contact with that. And so here you can see the front with the Spell and Potion cover page, and then here you can see what it looks like on the back with using the paper to decorate cover the back side as well. I hope you've enjoyed this tutorial, and I've given you some ideas on how you can make your own spell book. I will have the link to my blog in the description area where you can get more information about the supply list and the image sets that I have. I will also leave a link on the bottom to Amazon where I purchased the paper pack. That's not the only paper pack they have, so there are others like it. You can do a search, but at least it'll give you a starting place if you want to go look for it. And other than that, that wraps it up for Halloween, and I'll be back later in the year.